The third is his memory, a novel, narrated by Elena Martez, Part 1. The Girl Who Chose Clearly. Chapter 1. My husband is very rich. He has everything: money, reputation, influence, a name that opens every door in Europe before you even raise your fist to knock. He built his own company before he was 25, doubled it before 30, and when he inherited the Voss Group chairmanship, he tripled it within 4 years. Journalists write about him, business schools study him, women photograph him at galas and post the pictures with captions that say things like "European dream" and "too perfect to be real." The one thing my husband does not have is my love. I say that simply the way you state any fact. The sky is grey. The coffee is cold. My husband does not have my love. It is not a tragedy. It is simply the architecture of our arrangement. Because the person he once pursued across the cobblestone campus of the University of Vienna with flowers and handwritten notes and the kind of public devotion that makes entire student dormitories stop and stare was not me. It was Sophia Reinhardt, my roommate. I still remember the evening it happened. We were in our room on the 3rd floor of the women's residence hall, the one with the narrow windows and the old radiator that clanged all winter, like someone was trapped inside it. Sophia was at her desk, doing nothing in particular, which she often was because she was the kind of beautiful that does not need to try very hard at anything. I was sitting on my bed with a green face mask on, peeling the dried edges away from my chin with the focused satisfaction of someone completing a small but meaningful task. And then the first delivery arrived. A young man in a dark jacket knocked and held out a bouquet, so enormous he had to turn it sideways to fit through the door frame. The roses were deep red, almost black, at the centers, and they filled the small room with a perfume so thick it felt like breathing velvet. Then another knocked, then another. By the time the 7th arrived, the corridor had become a spectacle. Girls leaned out of doorways in towels and slippers and winter coats. Laughter echoed up the staircase. Someone ran to get her phone. Someone else stood at the end of the hall, counting and calling out numbers to the growing crowd. By the 11th bouquet, the number was confirmed: 9,000 roses. 9,000. The florist had staggered the deliveries, so each one felt like a fresh declaration of intent. The hallway was impassable. Our room smelled like a greenhouse. Every girl on our floor took armloads home. They draped themselves across their beds, pressing petals to their cheeks, and sighing theatrically, and saying things like, "This is what I live for, and some men still know how to love." I sat cross-legged on my mattress, holding a handful of deep burgundy petals and watching Sophia. She had not moved from her chair. She sat with her back very straight, and her hands folded in her lap, and her expression arranged into something careful and blank. Sophia had cheekbones that could cut glass and eyes the color of dark amber, and she dressed simply, but always right the way some women do without apparent effort. She was the most beautiful person in every room she entered, and she was usually the most unimpressed by it. I pulled the last strip of mask from my jaw and said, "He is not ugly, and his family is apparently worth something extraordinary." She turned those amber eyes on me. "He is theatrical. He sent 9,000 roses. He is something. Theatrical men exhaust me. They perform feeling instead of having it. All this," she gestured at the flowers surrounding her, "tells me nothing about who he is. It tells me only that he wants to be seen wanting me. There is a difference." I thought about that. I was still thinking about it when she added, "He bores me anyway. Men like that always do." Men like what? Men who have never been told no. I peeled the last piece of mask from my forehead and looked at her. "You could tell him no." "I intend to." "Then I will go tell him yes." Something shifted in her face. It was fast like a ripple, crossing still water gone before I could name it. She looked away. "You are welcome to him." I washed my face, dried it carefully, put on the dress I wore when I wanted to look as though I had not tried particularly hard, but had somehow arrived at exactly the right result. Then I went downstairs. He was still there. He was standing in the courtyard in the October rain with one last bouquet in his hand, the black roses I had noticed among the first delivery, tied with a dark ribbon. He was tall, well-dressed in that understated way that costs more than it appears to, with dark hair and gold-framed glasses that made him look like an architect or a philosopher or some elegant combination of both. The rain was soaking through his jacket. He did not seem to have noticed. I walked toward him, under my umbrella, and stopped a few steps away and looked at him, the way I look at things I am considering acquiring. "She is not coming down," I said. He turned. He registered me, the girl from the same room, the one he had probably seen in passing but not paid particular attention to. "I see. She has had a boyfriend for 6 months. She simply never mentioned it because she did not consider it her responsibility to manage your expectations." He removed his glasses. Without them, he looked younger, more open to damage. He cleaned the lenses with his sleeve, though they were not dirty. A man who needs something to do with his hands. "I did not know," he said. "No, you did not." A pause. "I apologize for the disruption." "Keep the apology. Give me the flowers." He looked down at the black roses in his hand and then at me. Something moved in his expression that I could not quite classify. "They are yours," he said, and held them out. I took them and tilted my umbrella so it covered us both. "I am Elena. I live in the same room." "I know," he looked at me. "I have seen you." I did not know what to do with that, so I said, "I do not have a boyfriend." The silence that followed lasted long enough that his driver had time to pull the car to the building entrance and wait. Long enough that the rain picked up and drummed on the umbrella fabric and ran in thin streams off the edges. "Your number," he said finally. I told him. He entered it without looking away from me, pocketed his phone and walked to the car. I stood in the courtyard, holding my black roses, and watched the car leave and thought, this can work. I had looked him up already, of course. I am the kind of person who researches variables before committing to positions. His name was Adrian Voss, 23 years old, degree in economics from Vienna, and an MBA, already completed at a business school in London. Son of the late Heinrich Voss and grandson of the man who had founded the Voss Group, which was now one of the most significant private holding companies in Central Europe. He had started his own subsidiary at 21. It was profitable. He would be very powerful in 10 years and was already well on his way. I understood perfectly why Sophia found him boring. I also understood that I was not Sophia. My parents spent my entire childhood arguing about money. Not screaming, not dramatically. The specific grinding argument of two people who love each other but cannot stretch what they have far enough to cover everything they need, who fight about grocery receipts and heating bills and whether the car can last another winter, and who said what to whose mother about the cost of Christmas. They divorced when I was 14. Both of them came out of it smaller than they had been going in. I decided at 15 that I would never live that way. I would never choose a person and then watch the choosing slowly destroy both of us because we could not afford to be kind. I needed someone with money, a solid foundation, the kind of life where you do not have to count what you spend. So I went downstairs and took the roses and told Adrian Voss to pursue me, and he did. Chapter 2. It took him 8 months. He was not theatrical with me. Whatever bad advice he had been operating on when he sent the roses was gone by the time he called, 3 days later, to ask if I would like coffee. He arrived at the cafe I named exactly on time, not 5 minutes early, which would have been anxious, not 2 minutes late, which would have been a statement. On time because he respected my hours the way he respected his own. We talked for 2 hours. He asked what I was studying and listened to my answers with a quality of attention I found unusual in men his age, the attention of someone who files information rather than waiting for his turn to speak. He told me about his company with the low-key precision of someone describing a problem they enjoyed solving rather than a trophy they wanted admired. I found him interesting, which was not what I had expected. I had expected to find him useful. He sent me an article the following week. Something I had mentioned wanting to read. No note, just the article. That told me more than the roses had. We had coffee 3 times, then dinner again. He did not press, he did not perform. He showed up when he said he would, and was where he said he would be, and said exactly what he meant, no more, no less. It was a relief. I had spent a great deal of energy in my life managing the emotional weather of people who express themselves in indirect weather patterns. Adrian Voss expressed himself in complete sentences, delivered at reasonable intervals. I did not love him. I want to be clear about that. I found him capable and steady and considerably more interesting than I had budgeted for. But love was not what I was building. Sophia watched all of this from our shared room. She was still with her own person, a musician named Max, who played violin and talked about sound the way architects talk about space. She said little about Adrian, except occasionally, be careful. When I asked careful of what she said, different things at different times. Once she said, he is more serious than you think. Once she said, he remembers everything. In April of our final year, he asked me to marry him. No ring and a dessert, no speech about fate. We were at a restaurant he liked, a small Austrian place, with wooden tables and a menu that had not changed in 30 years, and after the meal he set his fork down and said, I would like us to get married. I think we work. I would like to know if you agree. I agreed. The wedding was enormous. His family was an old Viennese family, and old Viennese families do not do small events. The ceremony was at his family estate, outside the city, a property with formal gardens, and a Baroque chapel and a reception hall with painted ceilings. 300 guests. A string quartet. A dinner that lasted until 2 a.m. I wore ivory silk. I smiled at the right moments. In every photograph, I look exactly the way a Voss bride should look. I did not ask myself what I felt. I knew what I wanted, and I had gotten it. That was enough. Chapter 3. After the wedding, my life became extraordinarily comfortable. I am not going to pretend otherwise or perform some retrospective guilt about it. I had planned for this, and it arrived, and it was genuinely good. The apartment in Vienna's first district was spacious and beautifully maintained. The access to travel was extraordinary. The freedom was real. Adrian worked constantly, which meant I had long stretches of time that were entirely my own, and I filled them with things that interested me, languages, painting. A reading group that met every 2 weeks in the apartment of a retired professor near the Ring, a friendship network that was small but solid. I was not lonely. People always assume I was lonely. I was not. I had built a life inside the marriage that functioned well and belonged to me. I was learning Italian and had nearly finished a correspondence course in art history. I traveled when I wanted. I came and went without accounting for my hours. I had a personal assistant named Clara who was organized beyond reason and deeply loyal in the protective way of people who have decided your success is their success. What I had was good. What I did not have was irrelevant because I had decided it was. Sophia. I thought about less than you might expect. We had barely spoken since the night she called me cheap in front of our roommates after I came upstairs with the black roses. That had surprised me because we were not close, but I had not imagined she had that in her. It took me a while to understand it. She had said she did not want him, and she had meant it at the time, and then watching me take what she had refused had created something in her she did not have language for. Resentment. Grief. Some complicated reflex of wanting what you have decided to give away. I had slapped her. I was not proud of that, but I had not apologized either because she had not apologized to me. She moved out of the dormitory the next week. I did not hear much about her after graduation. She was in Munich, then London, then I lost track entirely. But I kept a part of my mind allocated to the possibility of her return. Because Sophia Reinhardt was Adrian Voss's first great feeling, his 9,000 roses, the girl he had stood in the rain for. And I knew that feelings that large do not simply dissolve because the person who inspired them walked away. So I prepared. While Adrian traveled, I took courses: financial management, contract law, investment basics, language skills that would be marketable if I ever needed them to be. I was not doing this because I was unhappy. I was doing it because I am someone who does not allow herself to be caught unprepared. If the marriage ended, I would not leave empty-handed, and I would not leave helpless. My friend Petra, who I had known since childhood and who visited me periodically in Vienna, thought this was sad. She sat on my terrace one afternoon, watching the city, and said, "He is never here. He works very hard. Are you lonely?" I am in Venice next week. I was in Lisbon last month. Alone. With Clara and very good company at every stop. I am not lonely, Petra. The world is large. Adrian works hard so I can see it. She shook her head. A real marriage needs two people in the same place. A real marriage needs two people who do not destroy each other fighting about money. I have that. She gave me the look she always gives me when she thinks I am being deliberately difficult. She left. I sat on the terrace with my wine and looked at the city and felt, despite everything, I had said something small and quietly persistent that I had been trained not to name. Chapter 4. The trouble arrived in October, 3 years into the marriage. Sophia Reinhardt joined one of the Voss Group's subsidiary companies as a senior analyst. Clara told me on a Tuesday morning with the careful, neutral tone she uses when she is delivering something weighted. I was at my desk reading, and I put the papers down and looked out the window for a moment, and then I said, "Thank you." And we moved on to the rest of the morning's business. I did not panic. Panic is something I do internally and invisibly, which means it barely counts. What I did instead was think. Sophia was brilliant. I knew this from our shared years. She would have been good at whatever she chose. Finance suited her precision and her composure. It was not surprising she had landed in the Voss Group orbit. What mattered was what she did with the position. That week I ran into her at a corporate dinner. She was standing near the window with a glass of white wine talking to someone from the Geneva office. She wore dark blue, minimal jewelry, her hair pulled back simply. She had not changed much. The amber eyes were the same. The composure was the same. She saw me at almost the same moment I saw her. Neither of us had the advantage of surprise. We simply looked at each other briefly and evenly across a room full of expensive suits and careful conversation. I lifted my glass slightly. She gave the faintest nod. Across the room, Adrian was talking to 3 men from a Frankfurt firm. I watched him from the corner of my eye. I watched for the moment he noticed her. It was about 5 minutes after I did. He turned to say something to one of the Frankfurt men, and his line of sight crossed the room and found her and stayed there for perhaps 2 seconds longer than it would have stayed on anyone else. His expression did not change. He was much too controlled for that. But there was a pause, a micro-silence in whatever he had been saying that the Frankfurt men did not catch because they were not watching for it. I turned back to my own conversation. In the car home that night, he said without looking up from his phone, "Sophia Reinhardt is at the group now." "I know. You knew already." "Since Tuesday." A silence. "Is that going to be a problem?" "Is it going to be a problem for you?" I asked. He looked at me. In the moving darkness of the car, his face was harder to read than usual. "No," he said. "Good," I said, and turned to the window. I was not sure he was telling the truth. I was not sure he knew himself. Chapter 5. My friend Petra came again in November. She brought wine and cheese and the unasked-for version of her inner thoughts, which is usually what she brings. We sat in the kitchen, which is the room in the apartment, where I feel most like myself, and she looked at me across the table with the expression she wears when she has already decided what she is going to say. "Sophia Reinhardt is at the company now," she said. "Yes. Does that bother you?" "I am keeping track of it." "Elena," she turned her wine glass. "Do you love him?" I looked at my cup. "I did not marry him for love," I said. That was not the question. I did not answer for a long moment. I do not know, I said finally, which cost something saying it, because admitting uncertainty about something I had chosen to treat as settled felt like losing ground. Petra nodded slowly, as though she had suspected this for a long time. You know what your problem is, she said. I am sure you are about to tell me. You build everything perfectly. Every wall, every structure. You plan for every possibility. But you never put a door in. She gestured at the apartment around us. You built all this, and there is no way in. I looked at the kitchen window. The city was dark beyond it, the Viennese winter pressing against the glass. Doors let things out as well as in, I said. That is the point, she said. I thought about that for a long time after she left. Part 2, What Arrives Without Warning. Chapter 6. His name was Marcus Held. I need to be precise about this because the story of Marcus Held is the story of a mistake I made with clear eyes, which is worse than a mistake made in blindness because you cannot claim you did not see it coming. Marcus Held had tried to pursue me at university. He was handsome and charming and completely without depth, the kind of man who had always gotten what he wanted from women and could not process the experience of not getting it. I had said no to him 4 times. The 5th time, I was more direct about it. He did not take direction gracefully, and so in the way of men who cannot absorb rejection without transforming it into narrative. He told people that I had been pursuing him and been turned away. The story moved through our social circle and grew. By the time it reached its final form, I had become his tragic love story, rather than the woman who had told him clearly that she was not interested. I had not thought about Marcus Held in years. Then Petra mentioned he was back in Vienna. He asked about you, she said on one of her calls. He seemed to have grown up. People do change. Some people do, I said. He was asking how you were. Tell him I am very well. He sent me a message 2 weeks later, careful and neutral and tightly worded. The message of a man who knows he's on uncertain ground and is testing the surface before stepping out. He said he had heard we had a mutual friend in Petra. He said it had been a long time. He said if I was ever free for coffee, he would be glad to see me. I did not respond immediately. Here is the thing I need you to understand about that period. Sophia Reinhardt had just been assigned to a working group that required regular contact with Adrian's main office. They would be in the same meetings, the same rooms. I had been monitoring this the way you monitor a developing weather pattern, not panicking, simply watching and keeping the relevant information organized. And I was aware, in the way I am always aware of things I do not want to be aware of, that what I felt when I thought about this monitoring was something I had trained myself not to name. So when Marcus Held's message arrived, I let it sit in my inbox for 11 days, and then I replied, just coffee, I told myself. And then I told myself I was managing this perfectly because I was not feeling anything about Marcus Held, which was the point. He was simple and uncomplicated and had no connection to anything that was currently straining the edges of my very carefully organized life. We had coffee. He was easier than I remembered. The years had filed down some of his sharper edges. He had built something of his own, a consultancy that was modest but real, and the building had taught him things about himself that the earlier version had not known. He apologized during our second coffee for what he had said about me after university. Genuinely and without conditions. He said, I behaved badly and I have thought about it more than I should have. I received the apology. I did not tell him there was nothing here. I should have told him that. Instead, I had a third coffee and let him believe there was a question open between us, which there was not. But I let him believe it because it was easier than the alternative, and because there was some embarrassingly small part of me that was grateful to be wanted by someone, for whom the wanting had nothing to do with the Voss name. Chapter 7. Clara is not merely an assistant. I should have explained that earlier. She is perceptive and deeply loyal, and she has been with me long enough that she now occupies a position somewhere between employee and the kind of quiet friend who demonstrates care through efficiency rather than expression. She notices things. She tracks things. She tells me when she believes I need to know something, and she withholds information when she judges the information would cause unnecessary damage. She told me on a Wednesday afternoon in December that she had come across something. She had been monitoring in the discreet way she monitors all things that relate to my life and security, certain communications that pass through channels adjacent to our household. She had found that Petra was in contact with Marcus Held more regularly than I had known. That Petra had been, it became clear from the pattern of things, orchestrating a series of situations designed to give Marcus proximity to me. She had shared details of my schedule with him. She had arranged the dinners and the casual encounters with the care of someone building toward a specific outcome. I read through what Clara showed me. I sat very still for a long time. Petra, who had been my friend since we were 14. Petra, who visited me in Vienna and said things like, "You need a door in that wall, and he is never home." Petra, who had I now understood, decided on my behalf that my marriage was a prison, and that Marcus Held was the exit, and had proceeded to build the pathway toward that exit with the sincere conviction of someone who knows better than you what you need. She was wrong. She was so completely wrong about every element of what she thought she was doing. But she was wrong the way people are wrong when they love you and cannot stand to watch you make choices they cannot understand. I sat with the information for 2 days. Then I did what needed to be done. I told Marcus Held clearly and finally that I was not available to him. Not now, not in any version of the current situation. I said it kindly, but without any softness that could be mistaken for the door remaining open. He took it better than I expected. He said he had thought as much. He said he hoped I was happy. He left. I called Petra. The call was difficult. She cried. She said she had been so worried about me, that she had watched me for 3 years inside what she called a beautiful, lonely prison, that she had thought she was giving me a way out. I listened to all of it. Then I said, "Petra, you made decisions about my life that were not yours to make. You shared information about me that was not yours to share. And you did all of it because you are certain you know better than I do what I need." "Don't you," she said, "need something more than what you have?" I thought about that question for a long moment. "That is not a question you have the right to answer for me," I said. "And the way you tried to answer it has caused real damage." She cried more. I did not cry. We ended the call with things still unresolved between us. I sat in my kitchen alone and looked at the window and thought, what do I actually need? I did not answer it that night, but I stopped not thinking about it, which is its own kind of beginning. Chapter 8. The incident with the drugged wine happened in January. I was at a dinner. Not a Voss group event, just a dinner. 3 old acquaintances from university who had stayed in loose contact over the years and who met occasionally in expensive restaurants to update each other on the shape of their lives. Petra was not there. 2 women I had liked moderately, and a man named Daniel, who was an old friend of theirs and tangentially of mine. I did not know until much later that Daniel had another name in the version of events Marcus Held had been building. I had 1 glass of wine, just one because I was careful, and the wine did not taste right to me, slightly flat, slightly off, in a way I could not quite specify, but that made me set the glass down and drink water instead. Within 20 minutes, I was dizzy enough that sitting upright required effort. The conversation around me became blurry sound, without meaning, faces without clarity. I pressed the emergency button on my phone. Clara had made me program it. She had insisted on it years ago, part of the security architecture she had built around my life with Adrian, because that was the kind of architecture that came with being married to someone of his profile. I had agreed to it without fully believing I would ever need it. The security team arrived in under 8 minutes. What I heard slipping in and out of clarity was Daniel speaking to someone on his phone. His voice careful and specific. She didn't drink enough of it. "We need the photos anyway, even without..." And then another voice I had not heard before saying, "Just get what you can. Marcus needs this for the Voss contract." And then the security team was there and everything was very loud and then quiet. And then I was in a car and then I was in a hospital bed and Adrian was beside me. He looked terrible. Not the polished, controlled Adrian who wore expensive suits and handled 9-figure negotiations without visible strain. He looked as though he had not slept, his shirt untucked. His tie removed his face, showing something I'd never seen on it before. His jaw was tight in a way that had nothing to do with professional composure. "The wine has been tested," he said. His voice was very quiet. It was sedated. I looked at him. "Marcus Held coordinated it," he said. "He wanted photographs, for leverage, to force a business arrangement with the group." I said his name, just his name softly because I was still dizzy and it was all I could manage. Something crossed his face, something brief and painful that he shut down almost immediately, but not quite fast enough. "I am sorry," he said, very quietly. "I should have had better information about what was being built around you. You cannot know everything. I should have known this." He sat beside me for the rest of the night. I slept, drifted, woke. Each time I opened my eyes, he was there. I had never seen him remain somewhere without a professional reason before. He was always leaving, always moving toward the next thing. He stayed. By morning, the security team had extracted full CCTV footage from the restaurant. By noon, Adrian's legal team had secured the relevant communications. By evening, the case against Marcus Held was built. I lay in the hospital and thought about Daniel's voice. Marcus needs this for the Voss contract. He had used Petra and he had used me, not out of any genuine feeling, but as chess pieces in a business play. He had wrapped the whole arrangement in the story of the man who had never stopped loving the woman who rejected him, and Petra had believed the story because she wanted to, because it made the thing she was doing seem like help, rather than harm. "What happens to him?" I asked. Adrian looked at me. He had put the jacket back on by morning. He was composed again mostly. "His company is finished. He overextended himself in the last quarter and the liquidity is gone. What he tried to do last night ensures I will not be the one who helps him recover it." A pause. "And Petra?" A longer pause. "She was used. She was not the architect." I looked at the ceiling. Petra. She had believed in Marcus Held's story because she wanted to believe someone genuinely wanted me, because she thought that was what I was missing. She had not known what he really was. She had only known what he told her he was. That did not make what she did forgivable, but it made it explicable, and explicable is somewhere to start. Chapter 9. Jan Canova arrived in Vienna in February. This requires explanation. Jan was on paper a former colleague of Adrian's from his London years, now running a significant real estate investment operation out of Milan. In practice, he was also Sophia Reinhardt's former long-term companion, the man she had been with in London before she moved to Vienna, the man she had separated from, under circumstances that were, depending on who you asked, complicated or simply finished. He arrived in Vienna in February and within 2 weeks was attending the same professional events as Adrian and Sophia and occasionally me. Clara flagged this quickly. She was not certain it was significant. She mentioned it carefully, the way she mentions things she believes I should have, but is not certain I want. I did not react. I stored it. At a reception in the 3rd week of February, I watched from across a very long room as Jan Canova spoke to Sophia for approximately 12 minutes. Her posture was very controlled, more controlled than it needed to be for a professional conversation. His was easier, the ease of a man who has decided something and is simply waiting for the right moment to announce it. I kept my face entirely calm and my wine glass steady and my position in the room such that I could see both of them and the doorway through which Adrian would eventually appear. Adrian arrived 20 minutes into the reception. He crossed the room toward me and then, as he always did in these situations, his awareness mapped the space. He found Sophia, a small pause in his movement, almost imperceptible. And then he continued to my side. "Jan Canova is here," I said. Yes, he had already seen him. Of course he had. Sophia's former partner. I am aware. He looked at me. Is that going to be a problem? I had asked him that question 4 months ago and he had answered it. Now he was asking me. No, I said. Good. We stood together side by side watching the room. Chapter 10. I need to tell you about the conversation with Sophia. It happened in March. I did not arrange it. She did. She sent me a message saying she would like to speak with me privately if I was willing. She used the word willing, which told me she was uncertain about the reception. I was uncertain about it too. But I agreed. We met at a cafe near the university, the old part of the city, stone buildings and plane trees, not yet in leaf. She was already there when I arrived. Dark coat, no jewelry, the amber eyes composed and direct. She ordered coffee. I ordered coffee. We sat. I want to apologize, she said, for what I said to you. In the dormitory, after the roses, I looked at my cup. She had called me cheap. She had said it quietly and precisely in front of our shared roommates, and the word had landed like a stone in water, the ripples lasting for years. That was a long time ago, I said. It was still wrong. I knew it at the time, and I said it anyway. She held her cup. I said it because I was angry. Not at you, at myself. Why at yourself? She was quiet for a moment. Because I had told myself I did not want what he was offering. That was true, I did not want it from him. But watching you reach out and take it anyway, without hesitation, the way you do things, I felt something I did not have a name for. I called it contempt because contempt was simpler. It was not contempt. What was it? Something more like grief, she said. For something I had not known I wanted until I saw you take it. I sat with that for a moment. Did you want him? I asked. She considered. I wanted what he represented when he was standing in that courtyard in the rain. Someone looking specifically for one person, not just anyone. One specific person. She paused. I did not tell him I was not the person he was looking for. I should have. The night he first spoke to me and mentioned the music room, I knew immediately I was not the right person. But the thing he had built the feeling of being chosen that specifically I held on to it longer than I should have. I set my cup down. What music room? I said. She looked at me. You do not know, she said. Know what? She was quiet for a moment. And then she told me. Chapter 11. This is what Sophia told me. The autumn before, he sent the 9,000 roses before he approached her. Across the campus with a bouquet and an opening line about a music room Adrian Voss had been walking across the university grounds on a Thursday afternoon in October. He was going to the library. He passed the music building. Through an open window on the second floor, he heard a piano. He stopped. He was not musical. He had had lessons as a child and discontinued them at 15 for something more practical. Music was something he could appreciate intellectually, but that rarely touched him in any direct way. This stopped him, because whoever was playing was not playing for an audience. There was something completely private in the sound, completely real. The way sound is when the person making it has forgotten that anyone might hear. He stood on the path and listened and felt something in his chest shift in a way that was unfamiliar and slightly alarming. He looked up at the window. He could see in the oblique way you see things through a window, from a distance, a figure at the piano, and on top of the piano, sitting with the gravity of a very self-possessed animal, a stray cat. The figure was playing for the cat, or playing in the presence of the cat, or simply playing for themselves, with the cat as witness. He stood on the path longer than he meant to. Then someone called his name from across the grounds. He turned. By the time he looked back, the window was empty. The piano had stopped. He spent weeks looking for who it had been. He asked at the music department. He attended performances in the hope of recognizing something. And then one morning he saw Sophia Reinhardt crossing the courtyard. She was wearing a pale coat and her hair was pinned up, and something about the angle of her profile, something he could not name, reminded him of the figure he had seen through the window. He was wrong. He knew later he was wrong. But in that moment, he thought, there she is. He approached her with the line about the music room I saw you playing the piano for a stray cat, and I could not stop thinking about you. He said this to a woman who had never been in the music building in her life, who had no musical training, who had adopted the particular style she wore and the particular way she dressed from the woman she shared a room with. From me, Sophia had copied my style so completely that to a man who had glimpsed someone briefly through a window at a distance, she was interchangeable. And when he spoke to her about the music room, she had said nothing to correct him, because the thing he was offering, that specific intensity of being seen, was something she could not bring herself to refuse, even when it was not hers. She had refused him eventually, but she had not told him why, not the real why. And he had come back to me in the rain the afternoon I went downstairs and told him Sophia had a boyfriend. He had looked at me. Something had happened in him that he had not spoken aloud until much later. He had thought there. He never told you this, Sophia said. No, I said. I thought he must have. He did not. She was quiet. Outside the cafe, the city moved past the window trams and bicycles and people going about the middle of an ordinary Thursday. What was happening that afternoon, she said. The afternoon in the music room. I looked at the table. My parents called me that morning, I said, to tell me they were separating, both of them on the same call, as though presenting a unified front on the one occasion that required the least unification. I paused. I needed somewhere to go. I had not played in years. I just went in and sat down. You did not know anyone was there. I had no idea. She nodded slowly. He has always known, she said, from the moment he understood his mistake. He has known the person in the music room was you. And I think he has known it changed something. She looked at me carefully. He married you, Elena, not me. I did not answer. He married you, she said again. And I think if you look at the way he has been since you married him, the specific way he has been with you, you will find something there that was not built on calculation. I sat in the cafe for a long time after she left. I thought about the afternoon in the music room, about playing badly and then better and then not thinking about playing at all, just being inside the sound. About crying, which I almost never do. About the stray cat that had appeared on the windowsill and sat there watching me with entirely unjudging gravity. I thought about a person stopping on a path below, receiving something I had not known I was sending. Part 3, What Breaks. Chapter 12. The thing about Jan Canova is that he was patient. He had come to Vienna in February. By April, he was still there, still appearing at the same events, still watching Sophia with the careful attention of a man who has decided to wait. He had understood something about her, that Adrian, despite his years of proximity, had perhaps not, that Sophia Reinhardt did not respond to the 9,000 Roses approach. She responded to sustained, quiet evidence of having been paid attention to. What Gian had built across months of careful presence was exactly that. He was there. He noticed things about her. He talked to her about her work, as though it mattered to him, which it appeared to actually do. He was patient, in a way that was completely different from Adrian's patience, which was the patience of a disciplined man controlling himself. Gian's patience was the patience of someone genuinely comfortable, waiting because he was certain of what he was waiting for. I watched this develop, the way you watch weather over mountains, with respect and without illusion about your ability to redirect it. The question was not whether Sophia still felt something about Adrian. She did. I had seen it in the way she controlled herself when he entered a room. What I had not known until the cafe conversation was the precise shape of what she felt, not longing for him, specifically, but for what he had represented, the specificness of having been looked for. And what the cafe conversation had made clear was that this shape of feeling was something Gian Canova, with his sustained and targeted patience, had understood and was quietly answering. Adrian. I could not read clearly during this period. He was traveling more than usual, which was connected to a significant restructuring project his company was undertaking in Prague. He was homeless, which was not unusual, but felt different, charged with something I could not name, and was not ready to investigate. In April, he came home from Prague earlier than expected. I was in the sitting room when I heard the door. He came in still wearing his coat, a small box in his hand, and stopped when he saw me. "I thought you would not be home until Thursday," I said. "I came back early." He set the box on the table near the door. "I brought you something. From the shop near the Charles Bridge." He had never done that before. His assistant ordered things for people. He did not stop in shops on the way to airports. I looked at the box and then at him. "Are you all right?" I said. Something passed through his face that I did not have time to name. "Fine. The project is running long. I need to go back next week." He paused. "I wanted to see you first." That sentence did something in the vicinity of my sternum that I was not prepared for. I picked up the box. Inside was a small glass paperweight, clear with a thread of dark blue caught in the center, the kind of thing a craftsman makes slowly and completely. It was nothing practically useful. It was simply beautiful, and he had seen it in a shop window and thought of me and stopped. I stood in the sitting room, holding this small, beautiful thing, and felt the wall I had built so carefully, so thoroughly, develop the first crack. Chapter 13. The divorce papers arrived in May. They were not real divorce papers. Let me be precise about that. They were a document I had downloaded and begun to fill out, sitting at my desk on a Tuesday evening when Adrian was in Prague, and the apartment felt larger than usual, and I had been sitting there asking myself the question Petra had asked, and then the question Sophia had asked, and then a third question I had been refusing to form clearly, and when the third question finally formed, I had, in the particular way of people who manage their fear by building structures around it, immediately opened a search engine and started building. I filled out 2 pages, then I stopped and looked at what I had done and sat very still for a long time. Then I closed the document. I did not save it. But somehow, in the way of things that happen in close quarters with other people, the document became known. Not to Adrian directly, to his assistant Florian, who had come to the apartment the next morning to drop off some papers, and who had seen my laptop screen before I had fully closed the lid, and who had relayed this to Clara, and Clara had sat with the information for 2 days before telling me she had it. "Did you tell him?" I asked. "No," she said. "It was not mine to tell." She was right. It was not hers to tell. But Florian had also told someone else, and that someone had told Adrian. He called from Prague that evening. I answered. He said, "Tell me what you are thinking." I said, "How do you know what I was thinking?" He said, "It does not matter how, tell me." I was quiet for a moment. Then I said, "I have been thinking that we built something that functions, but that I am not certain what it is built on. And I am not certain you know what you want it to be built on. Not anymore." A very long silence. "I know what I want," he said. "Do you?" "I want you to not close that document and leave it closed," he said. "I want to come home and talk to you. I want to stop managing this marriage from a distance and say the things I should have said much earlier." "What things?" "The things about the music room," he said. I went very still. "You know," I said, "Sophia told me she had spoken with you." A pause. "I should have told you myself. I should have told you years ago. I was ashamed of the mistake, and I thought, I do not know what I thought, that it would sound ridiculous, that you would not believe me, that it did not change anything." "Does it change anything?" "It changes everything," he said. "It changed everything from the afternoon in the rain when you tilted the umbrella over both of us. I just did not know how to say it to someone who was so completely certain she did not need it." I sat in the kitchen in the empty apartment and held the phone. "Come home," I said. He came home. Part 4, What Holds. Chapter 14. He came home on a Saturday, and we sat in the kitchen until nearly 2 in the morning, talking in a way we had never talked in 4 years of marriage. He told me the full story, not the abbreviated version Sophia had given me, but the one with his interior in it, the afternoon on the path, the piano sound through the window, the particular quality of what he had heard, which was not beauty exactly, but realness, someone alone, with a feeling large enough that they had to do something with it. He told me how he had looked for the person and been wrong and stayed wrong for months because he had too much pride to backtrack and not enough self-knowledge to understand what had actually happened. He told me about the afternoon in the rain. He said, "When you tilted the umbrella toward me, I recognized something. I did not know what I was recognizing. I thought it was just that you were interesting. But there was something else in it, something I only understood later when the pieces assembled themselves." He paused. "You hold yourself the same way when you are feeling something too large, the way you were holding the umbrella, the same angle, the same stillness underneath." I looked at him across the kitchen table. "I was not feeling anything particular that afternoon," I said. "No, I was assessing you." Something shifted in his expression. "What did you conclude? That you were capable and solvent and probably interesting, that you would do." He was quiet for a moment. "And what do you conclude now?" I thought about it honestly. I thought about 4 years of functioning marriage and the small, careful distance I had maintained throughout it, the preparations, the courses, the documentation. I thought about the paperweight from Prague. I thought about the hospital room and his face when I had said his name. I think I said slowly that I have been so busy managing the possible ending that I did not learn what I actually had. He looked at me. "What do you have, Bise?" he said. I thought about what Sophia had said. "He married you, Elena, not me." I thought about a man on a path in October stopped by a sound. "Someone who was looking for me before he knew my name," I said, "and who has been here since waiting for me to be ready to know it." He reached across the kitchen table and put his hand near mine, not taking it, offering. I looked at his hand. I turned mine over. Chapter 15. The morning after was different, not dramatically different. We did not become different people overnight. The habits of 4 years do not dissolve in one kitchen conversation, nor should they. What changed was subtler a quality of presence, an absence of the specific distance we had both been maintaining with such practiced ease. He came home earlier that week, not every night, but more nights than before. When he was in the apartment, he was actually in it, not in his study or on calls, but sometimes just in the kitchen, when I was reading, or on the terrace when I was there, being in the same space without a professional reason for it. I noticed. I stopped pretending not to notice. We cooked dinner together twice in the following weeks, which had never happened before. He was methodical and followed instructions without resistance, which should not have been surprising, given how he managed everything else in his life, but somehow was. We ate at the kitchen table and talked about things that were not the management of the household or the schedule of his travel. He told me about his grandfather, the man who had built the Voss Group from almost nothing, who had come out of the war, years without family money or connections, and had built something through a combination of intelligence and a willingness to take risks, that his descendants found both inspiring and frightening. He was not careful, the way I am careful, Adrian said. He just moved. He decided and he moved. I have spent my whole career optimizing what he built because I am afraid of what happens if I simply move. "What are you afraid of?" I asked. He thought about it honestly, which I had not often seen him do about himself. "Of building the wrong thing," he said. "Of going in a direction and arriving somewhere that cannot be corrected." I looked at him. "Like the music room." He looked back. "Like the music room, yes." A pause. "You corrected it," I said. "Eventually." "That is the point," I said. "You cannot know in advance that you will correct it. You can only know that when you realize the error, you did not keep going in the wrong direction." He was quiet for a moment. "You are generous with that." "I am honest about it," I said. "There is a difference." He looked at me, and something in him that had been held carefully in place for a long time settled into a different position. Chapter 16. The Voss Group had a crisis in June. It was not caused by Adrian. It was caused by his younger brother Theo. Theo Voss is 28, charming, in the effortless way of people who have always had a net under them, always had an older sibling whose competence gave them room to be comfortable. He is not without intelligence. He is very much without the discipline that Adrian has spent his entire adult life cultivating. He makes decisions quickly, from instinct, and sometimes the instincts are right and sometimes they are not, and someone else cleans up the resulting difficulty. In June, the resulting difficulty was significant. Theo had been involved with a woman named Lena Braun, who ran a property investment fund out of Frankfurt. He had shared with her, in the way people share things with people they trust, certain non-public information about the Voss Group's upcoming moves in the Austrian real estate market. He had not thought of it as sharing information. He had thought of it as telling his girlfriend about his week. Lena had acted on it, repositioned on the basis of the information. When the Voss Group's moves became public, the fund had profited significantly. The timeline was clear, the trades were clear, the investigation that followed was serious. Adrian managed this. With the same quality of competence he brought to everything methodical, controlled, no panic, visible on the surface. He retained lawyers, managed communications, engaged with regulators, fully and honestly, because transparency was the only strategy that had any chance of working. He met with Theo in a series of conversations I was not present for, but whose aftermath I could read in the set of his jaw when he came home. Me for help. His instinct, identify the problem, and handle it himself, alone, with the thoroughness of someone who has never been shown that sharing the load is not the same as failing to carry it. In July, he came home late and came to find me on the terrace without saying anything first. I was reading. I put the book down. He stood at the railing, looking at the city, which was doing its summer evening thing, light on old rooftops, the Stephansdom, dark against a blue sky. To testify, he said. Is. But on purpose. He is careless, not corrupt, I said, and the investigators will likely reach the same conclusion if the process goes cleanly. For a moment, I am angry with him. Reasonable. Usually allow myself to be angry with him. He turned from the railing and looked at me. It is easier to manage than to be angry. Managing is actionable. It is also information, I said. Him paused at that. Down, I said. Tell me what you actually need. For a moment, with an expression I had not seen before, something open and slightly uncertain. And then he came and sat beside me. Not in the briefing room way, the efficient summary of professional problems, but in the actual way, with the weight of the thing in it, the years of managing Theo's consequences, the accumulated exhaustion of being the reliable one, the specific loneliness of never being allowed to be the one who needs steadying. I said, you are allowed to be tired. Allowed to say so, out loud, to me. That is the point of this. Point of this, he said, quietly, genuinely asking. Petra's image, the wall without a door. Who have stopped managing around each other, I said, and started being in the thing instead. For a long moment. Back in his chair and looked at the city and said, I did not know you were there when I started. In the music room, I only knew I had heard something I wanted to find again. I said, found you in the rain, I thought. I did not think anything specific. I just thought yes, before I had any reason to. City. Full, I said. When I gave you my number, I thought this is the most useful thing I have done today. Sound that was nearly a laugh. That is honestly very unflattering. Honest. Said. It is. On the terrace until the sky darkened. The city settled into its nighttime version, quieter, the lights coming on in the old buildings, the trams still moving through the dark streets. He said, I told you about the music room much sooner, he said. I was ashamed of the mistake. But the mistake was not the important part. The important part was the afternoon itself. The sound. You not knowing anyone was there. I said, badly. He said. It was. He stopped. It was the truest thing I had heard in a very long time. Someone alone with something too large for the space around them. I did not know what it was or who it was. I only knew I had never heard anything like it. Hands called me that morning, I said, to say they were done, both of them on the phone at once, as though divorcing required the same cooperative front they had never managed during the marriage. How long have you known? Mentioned it one evening 2 years ago. You said the word separating, and there was something in how you said it that made me look up the date and cross-reference. He paused. I should have said something then. You did not know how to say I had been watching you through a window when you thought you were alone without it sounding like a confession of something terrible. This. Terrible, I said. You were just on a path. I said, I was just on a path. Playing a piano for a stray cat because I had no one to talk to. Each other in the dark of the terrace. Due to hear it, I said, but I am glad someone did. Face changed entirely. 17. Ceremony happened in September. Adrian. We arrived at the regulatory offices on a grey morning, the kind of Vienna September that carries the first cold edge of what is coming, and sat in the waiting area while Theo went in to speak. Pale, and wore a new suit, and looked younger than his 28 years. He had been genuinely frightened. For months, not the performative anxiety of someone managing impressions, but the real fear of someone who had done something careless and was now watching the full dimension of that carelessness unfold. The fear had changed him slightly, made him quieter, made him listen more than he spoke, which was not historically his way. Truth. About what had happened, about what he had told Lena and why, and what he had understood or failed to understand about the consequences. He did not minimize. He did not attempt to redirect the narrative toward a more favorable interpretation. He was just honest, and honest was what the situation required. But he walked out into the corridor and looked at Adrian with an expression that was asking something without quite forming the question. You did the right thing. Something released in him. One hand briefly on Theo's shoulder. The gesture of someone who does not do gestures, easily doing the one that mattered. Then he turned to me. He turned, said, something good. Restaurant 3 blocks from the offices that he had been going to for 15 years. One of those Viennese places that do not change, because they do not need to. We sat across from each other and ordered food, and did not talk about the testimony or the investigation, or any of the professional machinery that had consumed the past several months. Theo briefly about the strange way difficulty can teach things that nothing else teaches. We talked about his grandfather again. We talked about a book I was reading which he had also read, and found we had different views on the ending, and argued about it, in the pleasant way you argue with someone who knows how to disagree without wanting to win. Restaurant for 2 hours, across the table, and thought, this is the person who was always here. Behind all the management, and the careful distance, and the years of functioning alongside each other without quite touching. I've been married to him for 4 years, and I am only now meeting him. Sad thought, actually. It is a very specific kind of relief. In Vienna in October. Did it, which surprised me. He said he wanted to walk the university campus again, that he had not been back since graduating and had been thinking about it. He said it simply, without apparent agenda. Thursday afternoon. The campus was busy with the October urgency of a new term beginning, students moving between buildings with the slightly unreal energy of people who are still deciding what everything means. The trees were starting to turn. The light was the October light, that low-angled gold that makes everything look briefly more important than it is. The ground slowly. Anything about the music room until we were nearly there. On the path and looked at the building. He said, "Third window from the left." Closed against the October cold. Behind it somewhere there were presumably practice rooms and people using them in the ordinary way of a music department on an autumn afternoon. "Path," I said. "Path." For a moment. "Play," he said. "I have kept up with it more in the last few years. I would like to hear you play." Building. Then he looked at me. "If it were possible." The name Voss opens most doors in Vienna. We were shown to a practice room on the second floor, a small room with a good upright piano and a window that looked out over the courtyard. Not the same room, but close enough. At first, as I had promised, the nerves of an audience, even an audience of one, producing the familiar tightening in my hands. Then better. Then at some point the thinking stopped and the playing happened the way it sometimes does, the way it had happened that afternoon 11 years ago when I had sat down at a piano in grief and found something that went beyond technique into some other register entirely. Long time. And turned on the bench. He was leaning against the wall with his arms loose at his sides, and he looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before, and then recognized it was the expression of someone who has found the thing they were looking for. "A cat," he said. "Cat," I agreed. "You are playing for me," I said, "and now I am playing for you." He sat beside me on the bench, which was not designed for two people, but made room for them if they were willing to sit close. He looked at the keys. "Nothing else," he said. "Nothing else." Beside me and listened to the music in the practice room. And through the window, the October light moved over the courtyard, and the city went on. Around us in its ordinary way, and inside the small room, something that had been building across years of careful distance and cautious management arrived at last at something simple. I've been preparing for the ending of this for so long that I forgot to notice the middle. The middle is everything. The things we keep. But we were different. Particularly different. Not the difference of people in films where everything resolves in a single conversation followed by string music. The difference of people who have stopped performing in the same direction and started actually moving toward each other. Earlier and more often, I stopped creating independent activities, specifically as buffers against his absence, and started simply being available for the evenings when he was there. We cooked, which we had never done together before, and he was methodical and careful about it, and took direction, well, which surprised me, and then did not surprise me because it was consistent with how he did everything. Not the functional exchanges of two people managing a household. The other kind, what he was finding difficult, what I was thinking about, what he had read that week that had stayed with him, what I had found interesting in the city. Small things, the accumulation of small things. About the years after his father died, he had been 24. He had stepped into the chairmanship before. He was ready because ready was not the available option, and he had managed the transition with the same controlled competence he brought to everything, and had not told anyone, including his mother, how afraid he was. He had not known how to be afraid and competent at the same time. He had thought they were mutually exclusive. I said, "Now, you." "Watching you," he said. "I am not afraid of anything." "You are afraid of quite a lot," he said. "You are simply the most controlled, afraid person I have ever met." A divorce document I had begun and not saved. "All right." He does not smile often, Adrian. When he does, it changes his face entirely, removes the architectural seriousness, and shows something younger underneath something that must have been how he looked before he became responsible for so much. I keep seeing that. In November. Badly. She had an offer from a company in Zurich that was genuinely better, and she was honest about it, and generous with the transition, staying an extra month to help train her replacement. We had worked together for 4 years. She had been in ways I could not have known when she started one of the people I trusted most. One day she came to my office and stood in the doorway and said, "I wanted to say something before I go." I said, I have watched you manage your marriage the way you manage everything else, with complete precision, every contingency accounted for, every exit mapped." She paused. "In the last few months, I have watched you stop managing it and start being in it." She looked at me carefully. "You seem better." I agreed. "Too," she said, "for what it is worth." I sat in my office for a while after she did. All the documentation I had prepared, the financial analysis, the legal research, the careful, thorough preparation for the ending of something that had not been allowed to finish beginning. I spent so long preparing for the loss that I almost created it. About very controlled people. The control is itself a kind of vulnerability because it requires you to keep so much at arm's length that you sometimes do not know you are pushing away what you most want until it has moved far enough away to be visible. When it comes is worth something. 1. In December. First time we had seen each other since our phone call in the autumn. The difficult one, where I had said the things that needed to be said, and she had cried, and we had ended the call with things still unresolved. She had written twice in the intervening months, careful letters, more careful than her usual directness. I had written back, not warmly exactly, but not closed. On a Saturday with wine and the cheese from the market near her house, and the particular quality of someone who is carrying a conversation they have been preparing for a long time. Kitchen. "Wrong," said. "Helping." Convinced I could see what you needed more clearly than you could. She held her wine glass. I convinced myself that was what friendship meant. Seeing things for people who could not see them for themselves. "That is what it means," I said. "But sometimes it means accepting that someone else's life is theirs to run even when you are certain they are running it wrong." She said, simply, directly. Kitchen in October, the bench in the practice room, the sound of the piano in a small room with one window and 2 people. I said, "I am beginning to be." Slowly, she said, "For the things I did, for Marcus Held, for all of it." I said, "I believe you." This woman I had known since we were 14, who had watched my marriage from the outside and made serious mistakes in what she did, with what she saw, and who had done it because she loved me, and could not stand to see what she interpreted as suffering. "Us," I said. "It is just going to take some time to feel like it again." That was enough for now. She too. About the piano. Piano in our apartment. There had not been one since I married Adrian, because I had not thought of myself as someone who played piano, only as someone who had once played piano when she was young, and had needed it, and had then set it aside when life moved in other directions. In October, I started looking for one. Spring at an estate sale, in a village outside Vienna, an old Bechstein, upright late 19th century, in need of restoration but fundamentally sound. The craftsman who restored it said it was like finding a very good instrument that had been in the wrong house for too long. He said this approvingly, as though the instrument had been waiting for the right place to go. In our apartment, it took 4 men and a great deal of careful maneuvering to get it through the door and into the room. I had decided it would go in the room that had been a kind of formal sitting room we never used. The room seemed to know what it was for, once the piano was in it. First time the evening after it arrived, alone, because Adrian was working late, and I wanted the first time to be private, the way some things should be private. First, then better, then somewhere past better, into the place where playing is not about skill, but about something else, the same register it had always been, since I was very young, and needed somewhere to put what was too large for the rest of my life. 2 hours. Came home, he stopped in the doorway of the room, and I felt him there before I saw him. I played to the end of what I was playing and stopped. I said. In the hallway, he came in, he looked at the piano and then at me. Will you play something else? Something else. In the chair near the window and listened. Outside, the Vienna spring was doing what it does, tentative, and then certain the city slowly warming after the long grey winter. About playing, I just played. I turned to look at him, with the look I had first seen in the practice room in October, and had since come to recognize as the particular expression he wears when he has gotten what he was looking for. It is not dramatic. It is quiet and fully occupied, the expression of someone who is completely present. A cat once, he said, play for you, and now you play for me. 3. The university campus one more time. A year after the first return, October again, the same low gold light, same path, same place. At the second floor, third window from the left. Playing, he said. That afternoon, do you remember? Something I made up, I said. I did not have the technique for anything formal, not after years away from it. I was just making sounds that matched what I was feeling. Very well, he said. He was looking at the window with an expression that was both present and somewhere else in the past he was describing. Come up, he said. You. Away. And then I thought, he paused, I thought I would find you again. That however I was meant to find you, I would. Wrong person first, I said. Wrong person first, he agreed, and then I found you. Path in the October light. Parents on the phone that morning, the morning of the same October, 11 years ago, telling me they were done. I thought about going into the building because I had nowhere else to go. I thought about the piano and the cat and the afternoon that had been, without my knowing it, the beginning of something. The person on the path below stopped by a sound. I was not alone even then. Even when I thought I was most alone, there was someone on the path. I said, for stopping. For a long moment. He said, for playing. Through the campus, the students moved around us young and in motion, building things they could not yet see the full shape of. The trees were turning slow and inevitable. The city went on in its grand old particular way. And what love looks like from inside. 54. Loved him for a long time. It was not true. I realized somewhere in the practice room in October that it had become true, or perhaps that it had been true for some time, and I had been managing around it with the thoroughness with which I managed everything else. But saying it felt like taking down the last wall, and I had built the walls so carefully, and for such good reasons, that taking them down required something I had not previously been willing to spend. Trust. That he would not hurt me deliberately. I had established that. Not the trust that he would be where he said he would be, or do what he said he would do. I had established that too. The trust, I mean, is the kind that has no verification mechanism. The trust that accepts you cannot protect yourself from the thing you most want, that the best choice is also the most exposed choice, and that exposed is not the same as vulnerable, in the way I had always feared it would be. Slowly. He had always been patient with me, I understood now. The composure I had read for years as containment, as a man who had organized his feelings away, was actually something more like waiting. He had been waiting for me to stop preparing for the ending and start accepting the middle. One morning in November, I went downstairs and found him at the kitchen table with his coffee and some papers, the way he often was in early mornings before the day properly began. He looked up when I came in. "It's from him," I said, coffee cup down. For a long moment, with the particular quality of attention he gives to things that matter, I said. And then, before I could react to that, "I have been waiting for you to say it." "Honestly, since the rain," he said, "since the black roses." "That was more than 5 years ago." I said. "That," he said. "I have decided the most complete thing anyone has ever said to me, not because it is beautiful language, but because it is entirely true. And he knew it was true before I did, and he waited for me to catch up without once making the waiting into a demand." 5. Now, that I did not know at the beginning. Not only a financial condition, I was right that it matters, right that it was the thing that had been missing from my parents' marriage, right? That building on a solid, material foundation was not calculation but sense. I do not take back any of that. He is also being known, being seen by someone who has the full information and chooses to stay anyway. The kind of certainty that comes not from documentation or preparation or the careful mapping of every exit, but from the slow accumulation of a person showing you over and over in small ways that they are not going to use what they know about you against you. Is in my marriage, building for the contingency of its ending. I took courses and prepared documents and kept myself technically capable of walking away at any moment. None of that was wrong, but it was not the same as being in the marriage, and I had confused the preparation with the presence. It's harder. The presence requires you to care about the outcome, which means the outcome can hurt you, which is the specific thing I had designed the whole structure to prevent. But you cannot prevent it. Choose whether to let the possibility of being hurt keep you from the thing you are trying to protect yourself from, or whether to be in it anyway with all the exposure that entails, because being in it is the point. In it. Bench in the practice room in October. I chose it again every morning after that, in the particular small ways you choose things every day that are not grand declarations, but are the actual substance of choosing, being there, being honest, saying the thing instead of managing around it, playing the piano instead of keeping the music theoretical. If I am happy in the way that word is usually deployed, the bright, unambiguous version, I am something that is more honest than that. I am present. I am known by someone who chose to find me before he knew my name, and who has not, in all the years since, given me any real reason to doubt the quality of the choice. Different kind of security, and I did not know to look for. And I have. 26. What happened to the others? Reinhardt is still in Vienna. She did not leave the Voss group. She is good at her work, and the work is good for her, and the situation, while once complicated, has settled into something functional. She and I have coffee occasionally. The coffee of two people who share a history that was not always comfortable and have arrived at something that is not quite friendship, but is honest. Eva is still in her life. I see them sometimes at professional events, standing close, in the way of people who have decided to close the distance. She seems well. She seems in the specific way that is visible when you know what to look for, like someone who has been found by something she had given up expecting. Vienna in the spring, and we walked by the river for 2 hours and talked about the years of our friendship and the ways it had been complicated by her certainty that she knew what I needed better than I did. She is still my oldest friend. She is learning slowly that loving someone does not require you to manage them. We are still learning each other, which is what old friendships sometimes need to do. Is rebuilding after the investigation, which resolved with consequences that were serious but not catastrophic. He is more careful now. He asks questions before he makes decisions rather than after. He called me in December to say thank you for something I had said to him during the worst of the regulatory process, though I could not immediately remember what I had said. He reminded me, "You said the mistake was not the important part. Part was what you do after you see it clearly." I thought that was true. Is no longer in Vienna. His business did not survive what he had attempted and what it revealed. I did not make that happen. It simply happened the way things happen when the architecture of what you have built cannot support the weight of what you are trying to do with it. About him. Parents sometimes, not with the pain that I used to, but with the more complicated feeling of understanding. They were two people who loved each other and ran out of the resources required to sustain the loving under difficulty. They were not failures. They were people who deserved better tools. Tools. Not just the financial foundation, though I have that. The other tools, the willingness to be in the room, with the difficult thing to say, the sentence, instead of managing around it, to let myself be seen by someone who is watching. Had a piano. My parents had to sell it when money became the problem. It always was. I bought a different piano, a century-old Bechstein, that a craftsman in Vienna described as an instrument that had been in the wrong house for too long. Every morning, sometimes from the other room. He does not always come in. He does not need to. The sound reaches him wherever he is, the way sound through an open window reaches someone on a path below. It's been enough. 27, the last thing. Of our 5th wedding anniversary, Adrian came home early. Longer unusual. He came home early, several evenings each week. Now the change habit of someone who has reorganized their priorities around what actually matters. I was on the terrace with a glass of wine when I heard the elevator. Onto the terrace with a bottle of wine from the estate where we had spent part of our honeymoon, the one near Lake Bled that had a vineyard running down to the water. He had opened it before he came out. He said. We held our glasses and looked at the city, the evening version, the lights coming on in the old buildings, the slow fade of the sky above the roof lines. True, he said. He said this sometimes as a kind of game, a way of making room for the things we did not say in the ordinary run of conversation. For a moment. I said, for most of this marriage, not of you, of what it would cost me to actually be in it. While it was happening, he turned his glass. I was afraid, too, of saying the things about the music room, of what it would sound like. I think it would sound like you had been carrying something ridiculous for years. Sound like the truest thing I know about myself, he said. That I was on a path, and I heard something real, and I was looking for it before I had any logical reason to be. And when I found it, I stayed. As I do, he said. I thought about the 5 years of careful management, the preparation, the documentation, the maps of all the exits, and then the kitchen table, and the practice room, and the October campus, and the bench that was not designed for two but made room anyway. I stayed too, and over mine on the arm of the chair. And over terrace and drank the wine from the vineyard. By the lake and the city went on around us, and the evening became night, and the stars came out above the rooftops in the clear autumn air. played for a cat because I had no one else. I was on the path below and heard it and kept it for years. Is the whole story. The rest is just what happened while we were finding our way to that being known. Now, in the sitting stillness of a terrace above a city, I have made my own. I find I would not change a single note of it. 1,000 roses that were not for me. Roses that were. Years of building walls. Thursday in October, when I finally played again with no one watching and found out I was wrong about that. Was the path. Brought me here. Exactly where I was always going. The author belongs to Elena, who narrates it and who is not always as self-aware as she believes she is. The version you have read is her version, shaped by what she was able to see and what she was ready to admit. Adrian's version would be different and gentler toward her at the moments where she is harshest about herself. The room is real in the sense that matters. The rest is interpretation. Interpretation. The cat on the piano. The rain. The black roses. Someone stopping on a path because they heard something true. Happened. Everything followed from them. Important things usually work.